Welcome. Let me start with a simple notion of my gratitude for the land I come from Australia. And this is a thanks to the people who own the original lands, the original owners of our land, and it is our responsibility, both morally and ethically, to give my sincere thanks and on behalf of everyone in our country. Cities for all is a notion which is very prominent in the world today. For political reasons, for social reasons, for economic reasons, the notion of cities for all is so relevant for us today, which is becoming more and more pressing issues for leadership, for people, but more importantly, for the future of our cities. One thing which often comes to our mind when we speak about cities and the notion of inclusion in the cities, what are the cities today? When we look at rapid urbanization, huge growth of population in our cities, rising inequalities, complexities of environment and the climate, are the cities showing us an order or chaos? I want to start with a very simple journey. This photograph is obviously an old photograph, and it shows you some kind of chaos. You look at the city, it's a city in 1964, one of the mega cities, mega city Delhi. But when you look at very carefully within this photograph, you're going to see something very unique. There's an order in this chaos. There's a very systematic way. Everyone has a place, everyone has an equity, everyone has an inclusion, including the animals. So the notion of people, equity, and sharing is a fundamental for cities for all. Sharing, in this particular case, is demonstrated by the notion of democracy. That how democratic our cities are today are shown by the level of equity and inclusion in our cities. 1964 megacity Delhi, and Delhi, by any evidence we see it today, is going to be the largest city in the world by 2030, surpassing Tokyo, any city. So this is the 1964's mega city, which is going to be the largest city in the world by 2030. Order, chaos, and a level of democracy. Beautiful city. People have access. People have very strong view of ownership in this city. And those of you who has been to Seoul, they know story behind this fantastic space. Once, this was a big highway going through the middle of the city. Physical separation, not connecting people, but dividing people. People, in turn, came and wanted to have their say. They didn't want physical infrastructure right in the middle of their city. They wanted a city which was more inclusive, but sharing. People could go and use their spaces instead of cars and traffic running. Seoul 2014 shows us a very strong evidence of how data can be used, how governance can make an effective inroads in our cities, but most importantly, listening to the people. I call this notion of highway to people's way. How physical highway made an inroad in a city, and how people's will and wishes and vision from the leaders changed that highway to the people's way. 2014, another mega city, a very successful model of building cities for all, Seoul. Any guess which city is this one? In the last 2 decades, I don't think any city has so much of leverage in changing a city than city of Medellin in Colombia. A city which was notorious and famous for its crime, the drug culture. The city today aspires to make itself as a model of transforming cities despite the huge level of social issues, criminal issues, but most important, engagement issues. 2017 Medellin, a poster city for the world today. There's no award in the last 2 to 3 years which hasn't been gone to Medellin. But what Medellin represents to us today, a very important message of leadership. Leadership is vital if you want to make cities for all. Leadership is vital if you want to include people in the notion of building cities for future. But more importantly, leadership is a catalyst for any paradigm shift. In reality, Medellin has demonstrated how you can transform your city despite all the complexities and the problem. 2017, another large city, Medellin. But what lies behind all this is drive. And most of the drive includes people. Technology can solve some of the issue, but it's only a facilitator. It's the people. So I want to show you some of the key people. You may have heard about some of these people, may never have heard about these people. Urbanization in India is seen as a great opportunity, economic, social, political, in every way. This man reformed a lot of notion of urbanization in India. He is considered as telecom man, and he was in fact one of the forefathers of the whole IT revolution in India, which transformed the country, the economy, and in a lot of ways our cities in India. Sam Pitroda. This person, and we also want to pay a tribute to this person who was one of the nominations for the Nobel Prize, and he is considered as someone who's given his entire life to promote inclusion in the cities from the lower side, from the people who are the most vulnerable in our cities. Joachim Arputham was known as a miracle man. He was simply known because he single-handedly changed the notion of how slums play the role in the economics of our cities. In Mumbai, he was considered not only as a miracle man, he was considered as a very strong entity. And these two people are a real example of leadership, that how city leadership is transforming. Mayor Park from Seoul has demonstrated how data effectively change the governance, and how governance, if done by right leadership style, can change the cities. He demonstrated it purely and simply in the city of Seoul. We have got Mayor Ada Colau, who's very clearly taking people's will, transforming the cities, and giving an equity and inclusion for people who are the most vulnerable in cities by way of housing, services, or the voice. So what's the message? The message here is urbanization is something we are not going to stop. Despite all the rhetoric and argument, this is going to be a pattern which is only going to increase in coming years. What do we see? We see some real opportunities. But as a notion, we also have to put, is these opportunities the sheer opportunities, or are they going to be a threat? I want to look at this notion of opportunities and threat from the experience of our speakers, our distinguished panels, and their experiences and the case studies from their cities. That do we really see the future of our cities, the challenges there, as a myth or reality in moving toward cities for all? And with that word, I would like to invite Giorgio to start our first panel and introduce some of the key members from the word stage. Over to you, sir.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yes, you can. Good afternoon. In the session I'm going to moderate, we were supposed to have 4 speakers, now we have 2, which is somehow, they are lucky because they will have more time to talk, but my message to you is that let's take the advantage of the time to ask questions. So, I suppose you all know how to use your app from the conference here. Use it. I will have your questions on an iPad. And if you don't like technology, you have a microphone there to talk directly to me. So I am Giorgio Prister. I'm president of an association of European cities called Major Cities of Europe. And believe me that in Europe, social inclusion is a major opportunity and believe me also a major issue. And you might all know of the turmoil that there is around new elections and big changes, and many of these changes are really driven by lack of social inclusion. So for all politicians in Europe, this is a major issue, and I think there will be a good discussion among us. Now, the 2 speakers that we will have now in the session are somehow very different, because one comes from, is a minister of the state of Andorra, Jover, and Andorra, as many of you I suppose know, is an important European country, but a small one, 70,000 inhabitants. And then we have the councillor of one of the biggest states in Malaysia. Sorry, I have to read his name because it's not easy for me, Teng Chang Kim, and thank you for being here. And Selangor is a very big one, 6 million inhabitants, and so there are some differences, but it's quite interesting to see if there are some commonalities. So again, I encourage you to ask questions through your app or by standing, and please, Javier, the stage is yours. I think you can sit down here, yes.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. For me, it's a pleasure to be here, and I want to thank the organization. It's an opportunity to share some of the ideas we are working in Andorra, and I would like to speak from an Andorra point of view, some good practices that maybe can be useful for you. And in my context, I would like to talk about Andorra as a smart country. Giorgio already told you that we are only 70,000 inhabitants, so a lot of cities want to become a smart city. In our case, due to this size, maybe we can become a smart country. But also related to this size, we want to do it in the right way. And for this reason, maybe what we want to do is to build up an inclusive society, that becoming a smart country enable us to improve our inclusiveness. I will focus mainly on the importance of the technologies and the inclusiveness, and if there is a relation or not. Of course, we have a digital divide. Of course, we have a digital gap, and we can understand this digital gap at different scales. For example, between different countries, related to their GDPs, maybe related to the capacity of access to technology, but also this digital gap is present inside of the same society, inside of the same country or city. For example, due to socio-economical parameters. And one of them that it's, I think, relevant is age. In fact, elder population is in risk to have a higher digital gap than other parts of our society. In this way, it's obvious. Technology is a great opportunity for societies. We can improve our quality of life. There is plenty of things we can do better with the help of technology. But we have to keep in mind that there are also drawbacks related to this technology. Abuse of these technologies, a specific illness, or using these tools in the wrong way. For example, in the case of education, cyberbullying, so using these technologies in the bad way. And it's important to be clear. The benefits we can obtain from technology will almost completely depend on the user's profile. And it's in this way that it's compulsory for us, for the governments, for the municipalities, to be sure to develop the digital literacy for our citizens in order to minimize these drawbacks and to maximize the opportunities related to technology. And it's for this reason that it's very important to have developed educational programs, specific educational programs, to develop this digital literacy for our students. Just one slide about the situation of technology in the educational system in Andorra. We have very good infrastructures. In fact, all the schools are connected to a very high capacity internet. All our students above 12 years old use as their main tool an iPad or a tablet. But it's very important to say that we don't want to use technology just as gadgets. So every tool, every technological element we are introducing inside of the schools has to have a specific pedagogic purpose. And it's only in this way that we can take the good benefits from the technology in the educational side. I have told you that there is some drawbacks related to technologies, and we are trying to tackling them with a transversal approach. The police, Ministry of Education, Ministry of Health are doing talks and several works inside of schools in order to make the students aware that it's very important to use the technologies in a responsible way. And there is one issue that it's very common, it's that adolescents, child, are not often aware that they are doing wrong things. For example, if they are sharing inadequate material on the social networks. And we have to raise this awareness. It's very important. And of course, we have to do it by education, by educating them. And also, an important point is, as we are introducing technology and we know there are some drawbacks, why not using this technology to turn drawbacks into opportunities? And as an example, we have introduced an application to all the cellular phones and to the tablets of the students in order to be able to detect. They can send an anonymous message to the head of school saying, we have a bullying problem in the school related to this student. Then are able to ask for help, also from anonymous point of view if they want. And also this application enables us to enter in a mediation mode and in order to help and to remediate this cyberbullying aspect. Now, I would like just to show you a small initiative we are carrying out in a small school in Andorra, in the Canillo parish. This initiative was carried out not only from the government, but also from Actuatech and with the help of the Living Lab from the MIT. And this project is about revisiting the village, in this case Canillo village, and to go from emotions to public management. The goal of this project was the students, 9, 10 years old, going through the village, taking pictures with their tablets, geolocalizing these pictures, and trying to do some files about each of these picture. They have to put the name, the date, a description. For example, here it's a playground beside the school, and very important, a feeling, an emotion related to this picture. In this case, it's happiness. They feel happy in this place. Then we classify all the pictures in 3 different feelings, so happy, sad, and angry. And we move from this classification of the feelings. In fact, what we are doing is something very interesting, because we are trying to move from a qualitative survey, feelings, to some more interesting data, more quantitative, that we can use it afterwards. And what we do is, in fact, a heat map of the region, of the places that the feelings of the students were happiness, sadness, or then getting angry. And related to this work, to this, in fact, data mining project, they move these conclusions to the mayor of the village. So our 9, 10 years old students were able to participate with the mayor and to say, okay, these are my feelings about the village. And I think it's very important, in order, first, you have a kind of dialogue from an intergenerational point of view, but also is a kind of direct democracy tool. Because, of course, when the mayor receives these results, he say, oh, maybe I have to change something about the red place related to angry feelings, or the blue place related to sad feelings. And sometimes with child, it's very difficult to have to take them on mind, that they be part of the decision process. But in this way, you are moving from their emotions, qualitative emotions, to something that the mayor really can use. And it's why I was telling you that it's not important that we use a huge amount of technology. It's not important that we fill our schools with gadgets. It's how we are using this kind of tools. And for example, here with this kind of project, we are giving them an experience, I think very positive. We are getting them the possibility, the opportunity of tasting democracy, and of course, how they can use this kind of technology in the right way. And also, it's a very important thing. We have to open our schools. We have to put our students in the city, in contact of the city, and that they begin to act as citizens. And also, we have to open the doors of the school and be able that professionals from the universities, from companies, from our society, come inside in the school and explain the realities and try to help in educating. It's not about anymore students and teachers. It's related to citizens that are growing and that they need the help, of course, of teachers, but also of all the possible members of the society. We will build up a more inclusive society if we learn our child how to participate in the decisions, that they become part of the decisions from the very beginning. From 9, 10 years old, of course, when they became adult, they can vote, they can participate more actively. But the roots are very important. And I have introduced related to this, in fact, educational programs are related to schools, but I told you that it's an important point about digital gap related to elder population. And I think from the governments we have also great responsibility in this case. World is changing. It's changing very fast. It's changing faster than people can succeed to mind the gap. In this way, we have to encourage lifelong learning, doing projects, courses, adapted to the calendars of people that are still working. And of course with moderate fees or free of charge, in order that this economic barrier cannot make the digital gap larger. Related to different publics, I think it's very important to learn, to teach technology to elder people. First of all, because they need some knowledge about technology in order to be a citizen that can evolve in our modern society with all the guarantees. But also, we have to make some specific content for people who has to change from one job to another. For helping in this professional mobility, we have to encourage to give them specific content based on technology that are making them to jump from one job to another possible. And of course, for this reason, to making this professional mobility easier, from a governmental point of view, we have to make certification, official certifications that can be used afterwards by the companies in order to understand what kind of contents we are giving to these people. And just to end, I would like to end with one closing remark. Normally education, when we think about education, there is two main goals. The first of them is enable our students to go to higher school, so to continue with their teaching. The second one is to give them competences in order to enter in the job market. But I think the most important one is often forgotten. It's to give them the tools to become citizens with critical thinking, autonomous learning, able to take their own decisions, and I think all the digital literacy, it's also necessary to become a modern citizen in the 21st century. So it's very important that inside of the educational programs we have also these attributes. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Rick. So, I'm going to introduce our next speaker from the state of Selangor, from Malaysia, and he's Executive Chancellor in charge of economic development. And I think the programs he will talk about somehow are addressing similar kind of issues as we heard before. Please.
Thank you, Giorgio. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to share with you the approach of the state of Selangor, approach of a solution first, technology later, in addressing the issues of social inclusion at the core of smart cities. Let me introduce the state of Selangor first. We are in the middle of West Malaysia, with a land area of about 8,000 square kilometers, population 6.32 million, and with the urbanizations of 91.4%. And the state is a multi-ethnic state with a populations of 6.38, and Malay race comprise 59%, Chinese 27%, Indian 13%, and the rest are 1%. So this is truly Asia for Selangor. So the full name actually for Selangor is Selangor Darul Ihsan. In English, Selangor Compassionate State. And it goes without saying that social inclusivity is in our gene. By the definitions of the World Bank, social inclusion is a process of improving the ability, opportunities, and dignity of those disadvantaged on the basis of their identity. So we are looking at the problem of the people, and we find solutions before we talk about technology. And this is the approach that we have been adopting for the past 3 years since we launched our Smart Selangor program. And in Selangor, we have 12 cities, 12 municipal cities within the state of Selangor. And therefore, in Selangor, we do not talk about smart cities because we are building 12 smart cities within the state. So we are talking about smart state, smart Selangor. So it's very ambitious, but we have to do that because of practicability. We can't be applying 12 different methods in building 12 cities simultaneously in the state of Selangor. And we have programs. We have a social network program. We provide a total of 42 programs from cradle to grave for our citizens under the Care for Citizen programs. So we look at the problems of the people and we look for the solutions. So we have come up with 42 programs. And all these solutions may not begin with technology. It is about solving the people's problem. It needs the involvement of people. It needs the participation of people. And of course, eventually, if we're talking about benefits of people, the benefit that the people will enjoy under our Smart Cities program. So let me introduce, we have 42 programs. I can't go through every one of them. This is an introduction of some of them. We have a program of affordable housing schemes. We have a program of monthly free water of 20,000 liters for every household in our state. We have a free bus service, which has 15 million of riderships in the year of 2017 after 3 years of implementations. And we have a series of program schemes for the educations. We have higher education gift. We have education fund for children of the estate workers. We have free tuitions for the secondary school students. We have childcare aid, preschool aid, and the scholarship trust fund for the university students. And of course, we have primary medical care scheme, which provide free medical for those underprivileged. We have a women's health scheme providing free mammogram. These are to enable the equitable and accessible healthcare. And we have for the petty traders and the small enterprises, we have microcredit schemes to assist them in their business, in their cash flow, between the credit that we provide between 1,200 US dollars to about 4,000 US dollars. And of course, we have programs for the elderly, for the senior citizens, for the disabled, and for the single parents. So these are our programs, part of the program, about 15 programs out of 42 programs that provide people to address the people problem. And of course, we have to leverage on technology for the better delivery along the way. So what did we do for the past 3 years? To reduce the digital divide, we provided free public Wi-Fi, and this is to ensure that there's connectivity. And we have about 3,500 hotspots where we provide Wi-Fi service for the people. And of course, we have a big number of users, 1.3 million. And we have this is the biggest public Wi-Fi network in Malaysia. And all this, we give focus to the public area, shopping mall, and schools, and so on. And in the process of the democratizing education to all students, we have this program of iStation. For the moment, we have an iStation in 9 libraries out of the 96 public libraries in our state. And of course, we have to collaborate with our Selangor Public Library Authority. And we are covering about 70% of the community libraries. And beside the Wi-Fi, free Wi-Fi hotspot, we also provide computers and iPads so that we can run a program. Among others, we run a program for basic coding. We train the people how to do basic coding, and also iOS apps development camp. And beside that, we also assist the Ministry of Education in upgrading the command of English and also the skills in maths and science. And this is all run through the program of iStations through our public libraries. And we have also trained the people how to use the skill of publishing, graphic design, and photographies. And of course, we have this program, a very interesting program, where we get the assistance of the university students from the electrical engineering departments to participate in training our secondary school students And we've done it, the first program, we've done it in 66 schools, and training about 800 students. And then we have a competition at the end of the program, of the training program, and they have come up with more than 80 IoT projects. And this is part of the program that we close the gap, close the digital gap of the people. And we believe that this is the only way that we go to people, we provide the facilities in order to close the digital gap. And we have also a program of simplifying access to public service and engaging the government. For that, we have, of course, we have the user app. The people can use the app to check on our Care for the Citizen programs. Who are those who are eligible for programs for the senior citizens, for the single parents schemes, for the scholarships, and so on. So they can use the apps to check the eligibility. And of course, they can share ideas to develop the communities. And of course, we also use the apps, allow them to use the apps to make complaints about the public infrastructures, waste management, and potholes, and so on and so forth. And to provide safety and convenience for the people and the petty traders, we have come up with e-wallet programs. And of course, we go to people at the ground. We are helping the petty traders rather than, of course, the big merchants. Because by doing so, by providing this service free of charge, then it will make the whole process smoothly so that people will know that this is the way that we can build the smart city together. We need their involvement, we need their participations, and therefore they will be able to know what are the benefits of building a smart cities. It has to be related to them. They must feel relevant in the process. And until today, we have more than 2 million petty traders that download the system. And of course, download is 2 million, the traders and of course the consumers. And about 5,000 petty traders within the state has actually participated in this program. And this is a very interesting one, our free bus service. In the state of Selangor, as I said, we have 6.6 over millions of populations. We have a problem of traffic congestions. In Selangor, every household have 2 cars. People do not take public transport. And also we have people who cannot afford actually to own their own vehicles. So what we do is we provide free bus service. For the moment, we have more than 150 buses plying every day from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. every day, all sponsored fully by the state government and partly by the local government. Initially, we do it without technology. We just provide a free service. Free bus service, people can take free for everyone. Then when people get used to it, then we make sure that the service is efficient, there are sufficient frequencies for the people to take the bus. When people feel that it's comfortable, it is convenient for them to take the bus, then we use the technology. Technology will come in. So the bus, we give them new buses so that they will know that actually using public transport is actually very comfortable. So the bus is with aircon, with Wi-Fi, with GPS, free Wi-Fi. And after that, we provide them with an app. The app, we call it a Selangor Intelligence Transport System, where by using the app, they will be able to check on the bus arrival time. They will be able to provide feedback on the services, and they will be able to use the e-hailing service for the last mile. And of course, more importantly, they will be able to know the locations of 1,300 bus stops in the state that with having the free bus service. So these are the convenience we provide people to not only to manage our traffic congestion issues, but also to lessen the economic burden, especially for the lower income group. So until today, we have 75,000 of downloads and 40,000 daily users. And as I said, we have about 15 million of riderships for the year of 2017. And for this year, we estimate to increase the ridership from 50 million to 30 million. So this is the approach that I mentioned, and these are the programs that we have implemented in order to address the real issue of social inclusions. That's all for the moment. Thank you.
So here come the questions. Yeah, the two questions, are you going to project them on the screen? No? Okay, I will ask them. So there are only two questions, but don't be shy. Please stand up, and if you want, there is a microphone there. So the first question is, how can city improve the living condition of the homeless and social excluded people? Use that. Yes.
In the state slang, the homeless issue is not a serious issue. In fact, we have a...
It's not.
Yeah, it's not a serious issue at all. In any event, we do have old folks home, which is run by the public and also sponsored by the federal government. And we think that it is sufficient for the moment to address the issue of homeless.
It's neither relevant in Andorra. Anyway, we have social helps in order to tackle poverty issues or people that on one time they can have difficulties.
Yes, maybe it's not applicable in those two examples, but I know in many countries it is applicable. Maybe somebody wants to say something about it? Because this is a very interesting topic, how to include people that are completely socially excluded from the society, that probably even don't want to be included somehow, although it's a little bit exaggerated. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm Wembo Murshid Kasule from Uganda, Kampala. My worry is that in most cases, when you're talking about the people that are not fully included, some of the people that are not always fully thought about are people with disabilities. And then I was looking at most of the apps that you've built, most of the buses that you've shown, but in all your photos and photo prints, I've not seen anywhere where a person with disability has been reflected. And what comes to my mind, in most cases, is one of the reasons that in most cases people with disabilities are left out. Can you throw more light of some specific examples or interventions that you've done to see to it that people with disabilities have also been able to move together with other people in the developments that you've shown to us? It's a question to both of you.
Thank you for the question. It's quite interesting, and I will try to answer as a Minister of Education, because I'm completely convinced that education is the main tool to change everything we want in society. And therefore, in education, we have to be fully inclusive. And this means that people with disabilities, we have to be able to put them in schools and that they have their own learning path, and to be able that they become what they want to become, and that the disability is not a limit. In this case, in Andorra, we are fully inclusive in formal education. It's a very expensive program, of course, but from a government point of view, we think it's one of the main decisions we have to take, that some people, due to their disabilities, are not taken beside. We have to include all of them in the educational progress.
In fact, in Selangor, for all the programs that we've introduced, priority is given to the disabled. And for the free bus services, all the buses are equipped with facilities that provide for the disabled. But I didn't show actually what is inside the bus itself, but it is equipped for the disabled. So that has been taken into considerations. So as I said, social inclusion is in our gene as far as Selangor is concerned. Thank you.
Now, another question is about coming migrants, which is something happening all over the world. Populations are moving from one continent to another in America, in Europe, and in other countries. And so do cities have enough capacity to absorb the coming migrants? How do you manage that? Do you have, who wants to start? You start.
In Malaysia, the issue of immigrants is actually within the jurisdictions of the federal government. So at the state level, we do not have much power and also resources to address the issues. But we try to include the immigrants in our program too. For example, free bus service is free for all. So there was some debate and dispute over the facility provided for the immigrants for using our free bus service. But the government policy has been that we have to be fair to all, and therefore this is part of it, that we allow them to use our service free of charge as our citizens. So this is part of it.
In the case of Andorra, we cannot understand the evolution of Andorra without understanding migratory flows. In fact, just after the Second World War, we were just 5,000 inhabitants. Now we are 70,000, so we are 14 times more. And I promise you, it's not a cause of natality. So immigration was the main factor for this, and people coming in order to make Andorra bigger, Andorra richer, and helping us. Sometimes also migrants come in bad situation, let's say. In this case, for example, from an education point of view, to get inside of formal education, every child has the right to be in formal education and have all the helps we give from the government, independently of their administrative status. Thank you.
Anybody else, maybe from the other countries in Europe, want to say something about immigration? I think this is a major problem everywhere, somehow managed or mismanaged. Any comment about it? No. So maybe I will do it, but if we have time. Now, the third question is, how does social inclusion, in your view, comprise institutionalized infrastructure for co-creation and public engagement in political decision-making? Public engagement in political decision-making. I think you want to take this one, right?
In fact, the example I have shown you is related to public engagement. And this is for 9, 10 years old. But when they are getting older, we have other projects. For example, we have one students sits inside of the parliament, in the seats of the deputies, and they make law proposals and they understand how our democracy is working. And another thing that is very interesting project related to high schools is that they have a compulsory project, which is they have to do something for their society. Sometimes it's to help NGO, sometimes could be something related to sports, but they have to find a project that can be useful for their society. And the main message is we have to give us a chance, our child, to become citizens. And during the process, we have to help them. They will not become from one day to another when they have 18 years old to become full citizens. It's a hard job, and we have to do this from 3 years old when they enter to school, 18 years old when they are leaving the high schools.
As I've shown just now, that we have apps that involve the people, so that they can engage government. What is that? We call school, the community online program apps, so that we can receive the comments and inputs from people every now and then. And besides that, for our local governments and for the state governments, we do have town hall meeting for the people to have their inputs, insights before we decided on the annual budget. So this is important process that people involved before the budget is approved by the legislature. I think this is the most important part, and perhaps this is the only state in Malaysia that we have done so, that engaging the public before the budget process is finalized.
So as I see on the screen, it's written 0, which means that we have finished our time. And so I hand over to my successor. And thank you for this good question, good session. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Welcome back. And I would like to request Giorgio and everyone who's in conversation, if you can please grab your seats. We just want to start this important session about digitization and inclusion. As a part of my role, again, I would like to acknowledge my gratitude again. And this is something we do it purely to say this is important aspect of recognizing where we come from, what we do. And in this session, we're going to relate and link the discussions we had earlier. I think one of the very profound things we heard in the last session from Eric, how do you make child into a citizen? What is the journey from being a child to become a citizen? And when you look at the process, look at what involves to get children to understand the cities and the responsibilities, I think that defines a lot about future of our cities. Accessibility and digitization has got a very strong correlation to say that digitization or technology per se, in fact, takes out a lot of barriers. It gives us an opportunity where we can utilize simple solutions in people's lives and make their lives rich. Accessibility is something very important in our cities. And accessibility cannot be restricted just by way of physical complications in the city. This is the city of Bangkok, which has got many streams, rivers, and we can see how the accessibility in Bangkok is very different when they utilize the same riverways for economic opportunity, enterprise, and most importantly, environment. Here, digitization is not playing a great role, but accessibility in all three spheres is very clearly demonstrated. You look at how people are doing a lot of entrepreneurial things by using the same physical challenges and converting them in economic opportunities. The next example is a little bit different. You can see what's happening here in this city in 1961. A city which demonstrates probably the same scenario, number of developing cities in the world. They look like this today. Fast forward this to 2012, and this is a city of Seoul. The transformation in 3 decades have been tremendous. A city over 18 million population, a large city, transformed by use of technology and digitization. Access by way of transport, by way of connectivity, by way of Internet of Things is one of the highest in city of Seoul. and they achieved all this in less than 3 decades. So there's a profound message for all of us. And it comes down to what do we do with rising urbanization. Earlier in the session, we heard about migrants coming to the city. We heard about complexity of giving access to people. But more importantly, what do we do with these numbers? Our theory is this is a great opportunity for everyone. Not for one city, not for one region, one country, continent, or only economic superpowers. This is an opportunity for every region, every country. And some of these numbers which came out of McKinsey's report, we are very old now, almost a decade old, but they give you tremendous opportunity which is available in our cities today. What it means for us, that urbanization is going to be really demonstrated if we are looking at the notion of cities for all. And this opportunity is a fundamental when we want to talk about accessibility and digitization in our cities. We have a very important panel representing very different spheres of the city stakeholders in this session. But before I introduce our first speaker, I would like you to do something very simple, to give you what it feels like when you don't have equal opportunity in your cities. What is it really like to feel when you can't do the things everyone else can do in your city, or majority of people can do in your cities? And this exercise is very simple. I would like you to turn to a person sitting on your right, and the person you're going to look to has to close their ears with both hands. You have to speak for about 10 to 20 seconds, and the person who's closed their ears has to tell you what exactly you have spoken. Very simple thing. Yeah? Try to do it just in 30 seconds. Make sure you don't do very loud. Very simple exercise, and I want to show it to you how difficult it is. You can watch their lip movements, you can watch anything you like. Try to do it. Okay. You got it all right, correct? All of you understood? All of you by and large? Now imagine, this is what you face in your cities when people have a real problem in hearing, when you can't hear voice. What connects us right now from here to you is the voice, the sound. The power of the voice, the sound is so important. Ability to hear is a very important thing in our cities. And those who don't have that ability to hear are going to miss out. And there's a rising trend. You know, the beautiful thing this thing is doing to all of us, we are all getting deafer day by day, and we don't even realize. So imagine if you don't have the ability to understand, to listen to people, how profound is that for us to ensure that people are going to listen, make sense of the sounds in our cities, and that complexity, if we don't address it, is only going to increase in our cities. We are honored to have someone who's dedicated her life working with people with disability to ensure they have equal access, especially people who have a problem with listening, people who have problems with sound, people who has any kind of disability in listening our day-to-day noises and the sounds. Maria, we want to invite you to please tell us what difference you're making for these people.
Okay, thanks so much for being here with so much choice to choose from, talking about accessibility and inclusion. I'd like to thank the organization for giving Visualify the opportunity to be here talking to you and just highlighting a couple of important things about building smart cities for all and not just for the able or the able one. Very quickly, I'd like to explain what we do at Visualify and why I am here talking to you about accessibility and inclusion. I think I need, do you have the command? Thank you. I think it doesn't work. I think there's a problem with my presentation. We at Visualify, we create technology for deaf people and for institutions and companies that are committed to accessibility. We make technology for deaf people and with deaf people. We have developed an algorithm that, along with machine learning, is able to recognize sounds and translate the sounds into visual and sensory alerts sent to any connected device. The algorithm learns with the environment. Okay, sorry. Spoiler. Okay. The algorithm is able to learn, it learns from the environment and from the user itself, so it gets better every day. As you know, it is an algorithm with a soul. It has a mission, and the mission of this algorithm we have created is help deaf people, empower deaf people so they can, hearing for them important sounds, so they can concentrate on just living as any one of us. Our first product is called Visualify Home, and it's a smart home device that hears for the user and alerts the user of any home sound important for them. The doorbell, the telephone ringing, a baby crying, the clock alarm, anything that they could want to hear, we could just alert the user of that. More than 1,000 homes in Spain are using it, and we are improving it very quickly with the help of the users, with their feedback. Along with Visualify Home, we are working to apply the sound recognition algorithm to make public and private spaces more accessible for people with hearing loss. Visualify Hospitality is our solutions for hotels, and it's a reality in Spain. We've got pilots for public libraries and city halls. And next in our roadmap will be train stations and airports that are much more complicated for the algorithm because they are noisy places and crowded ones. And we will end with the rest of the city, the streets themselves. It's important to say that we are a team of deaf and hearing people. I mean, it's common sense. We cannot create solutions for deaf people without deaf people, but this is not so common. We talk about this later. Just to frame the importance of what we are talking about, there are around 466 million people with hearing loss around the world, and 34 million are children. It is estimated that by 2050 there will be 900 million people with hearing loss around the world. So they are part of our cities, and they will be part of our cities. Even though for architects and for urban planners and for the authorities, their disability is invisible. They just don't imagine the challenges people with hearing loss face when just using our services. And to show you the barriers that deaf people face when they live in a city, let me introduce to Rihanna. She's 20. She lives in Valencia, very near here, and she works as a customer agent at Visualfy. She's a colleague of mine. She's deaf, and she's fluent in Spanish and international sign language. Rihanna wanted to study more than she did, but she couldn't. Due to lack of economic resources and to the impossibility to follow the classes without an interpreter and without technological support that exists. We don't have to invent it, we just have to apply it, but she couldn't. She just resigned to the fact that things are like that, and possibilities are not the same for all in our cities, in most of our cities. Well, she's really persistent. So she found the way to the job she wanted. She applied to Visualfy. And of course, for us, she was a fit. We create technology for deaf people. We need her insider's view. And she's perfect to show another deaf people how to use our products. But you know, we are special. Before us, she couldn't get to the interview step of any job she wanted, even though she could do it. She could perfectly do it. Technology, again, can help. We do help adapting workplaces for people with hearing loss, for diverse teams, but technology cannot help with mental barriers. You know, a week ago, we had a meeting with Google, and they told me that if you want to create products and services for all, you need all kinds of people in your team. I mean, that's a fact. Diversity is inspiring, diversity is enriching. But Rihanna wasn't given the opportunity because this kind of thinking is far from mainstream in most of our cities. Rihanna uses public transport too, but for her, the experience is much more stressful, because the experience has been designed by hearing people and for hearing people. If you observe Rihanna when she takes a bus, she quickly looks around and looks for a place facing the digital screens. If they don't work, she has a problem. If she takes a route she doesn't know or is traveling, she just accumulates a lot of information about everything just in case. Because if something happened, talking to the driver or talking to another user is not a tool she can use. Of course, she cannot read during the ride. If she asks for assistance at an airport, most of the times, I've seen it, someone with a wheelchair will appear to help her walking. I mean, she just needs some information provided in another channel or through the mobile, but someone with a wheelchair will appear, obliging her to just not avoid the queue, but making her being embarrassed with the whole situation. That's the kind of airport we do have in our cities, in most of our cities right now for hearing people. When she visits a hospital, she has to face a similar experience. Say that you are deaf, please not use the speaker system to call me. Hope people get the importance of that. If an emergency occurs while waiting, there's no way of alerting her except the screens again she has to stare at without blinking. Well, forget hospitals, universities, education, forget transport. Let's imagine that Rihanna wants to go out. Well, cinemas and theaters are excluded because most of them don't have subtitles or induction loops. Some exhibitions have sign language, so maybe exhibitions can be a choice in major cities. Induction loops in some places, but oops, most of the times they are not working. Some interesting apps, but sometimes not updated, that's all. I could follow, but I'm sure that you get the idea. Deaf people and people with hearing loss have barriers in the city that affect equality and their well-being. Part of the problem, I'm sure we're going to talk about this later, is that there are few architects and there are few urban planners that are deaf or that come from diverse communities just to give us their inspiring approach on what we are doing. Well, I'm sure we all agree that cities and the city experience should be designed for Rihanna too. But the point I'd like to make here is far beyond doing this because, it's the right thing to do. Helping Rihanna do normal things, normal is the right thing to do. I think that this can benefit us all, making our cities better. Let me back up this with 2 examples. We were talking before about sharing cities. If you have seen deaf people meeting, if you have attended a meeting of deaf people, you can observe them just putting chairs into conversation circles, adjusting the light just to optimize conditions for eye contact, doing all kinds of things to share, to participate, to talk to each other, to look face to face. Don't you think that we need much more of this in our cities, in our public spaces? I think that deaf people and disabled people in general, and their special approach, their sensory approach to spaces can help us a lot in imagining the cities of the future. It's not just the right thing to do. They can just provide inspiring approaches. Acoustics. Deaf people have different hearing loss, different levels of hearing loss. Some of them use assistive devices such as cochlear implants or hearing aids. And for them, reverberation sounds are painful. But for us, hearing people, noise is also painful. It damages our well-being. So designing spaces to avoid noise, background noise, is good for our hearing health too. All of us can benefit too from being alerted from important events, not just through the speakers, but through other channels and through other means. Because we can be just in different circumstances when receiving an alert. We can maybe listening to music or just not paying attention. So this is going to be good for all. If you have a look at the deaf urbanism, it's a movement pioneered by the Gallaudet University. The Gallaudet University is the first university run by deaf people. You would be surprised at how their guidelines can help us because they have a potential to help us build more inclusive and sharing cities, which I think is one of the main challenges for smart cities. So let's begin to think that, as Google told me a week ago, a diverse team to build the smart city of the future is necessary, because we, the ableist, excuse the word, we are missing so much talent approaching the whole thing of accessibility thinking, oh, we are good, we are going to do the right thing. We have to approach accessibility thinking that it's not just the right thing to do, it's the best thing to do. Because, all those years working with the deaf community, I've learned a lot about spaces, about cities, and about sharing. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you. Just to look at the numbers, 500 million people going to have this disability by 2050. Imagine out of 7 billion people living on this planet, 500 million people. But most important message, what you say, include them right at the beginning. When you're planning cities, you need to have people who can think, act, and experience those disabilities. And there's nothing better to include the people at the planning level, not at the implementation, not an operation. Now think another scenario, talking of inequality and being a leader of a city where you have to deal with the hunger. Hunger is something we don't talk often in our cities. Hunger is something which is directly related to how well our cities are going to be inclusive, performing, and making some of the economic contributions. Our next speaker, a former mayor from a city of about 1.6 million people in Mexico, had the main agenda or the aim to ensure he can eradicate or get rid of hunger from his city. It sounds reasonably simple proposition. Why can't you feed people in your cities when you have so much of surplus or wastage of the food? The reality, on the other hand, out of 1.6 million people, you had about 300,000 people who were either not fed or had a real problem in accessing food. That is a very different kind of inequality in our cities. That's a very different kind of how do you access these people and provide this important need, which is well for the well-being of the people, but most importantly, well-being of the city. Former mayor of Puebla from Mexico, Luis, floor is yours, and tell us what did you do to overcome this challenge?
Thank you very much, Sunil. Let me just begin by asking, how many of you come from European cities? How about from Latin American cities? Asia? Africa? Already. So we have very good representation here. And the topic today is inclusive and sharing cities. And as Sunil was telling you, Puebla is at the same time a very rich and a poor city in Latin America. It has about 1.6 million inhabitants. And this is just to give you an order of magnitude and a comparison between Puebla and Spain. We have basically 6.1 million inhabitants in all Puebla, as opposed to 46 million inhabitants in the whole country of Spain. But Barcelona is about the size of Puebla. And if I had to do a very fast summary of what distinguishes Puebla, I would say that it's a city of tradition. We're about to accomplish 500 years of being founded. It's a city of knowledge, actually. It's the city in Mexico with more universities. It is a city of industry. It's a very wealthy, prosperous city. Actually, as was mentioned by the World Bank, it is the fourth city in Mexico where it is easier to make businesses. It's a city of innovation. We were just named by the United Nations as a creative city in the whole world, and it's also a part of the Fab Cities network. But most importantly, as Sunil was saying to all of you, it's a city of contrasts. And I just want you to imagine the following. It's a city where 1.6 million people live, out of which 600,000 live in poverty. And out of those 600,000 who live in poverty, 2 years ago, 250,000 were living every day in a situation of extreme poverty because they did not have enough income to feed themselves or their families. Let me ask you another question. How many of you have the blessing of having children? Can you imagine what a parent feels every night at home by knowing that their children did not have breakfast, did not have lunch, did not have dinner, and that most probably the next day they're also not going to have enough money to feed their family? So 250,000 people 2 years ago were in this situation in Puebla. So I want you to know that after an initiative that was launched in Puebla it's a citizen-driven initiative. Out of those 250,000 people that lived in extreme poverty, 100,000 were able to have, on a daily basis, food. And let me tell you also that Puebla is growing its GDP at a 7% rate, whereas Mexico as a whole is growing its GDP at 1.6%. So we are growing much faster than the rest of the country, almost like a nation country. However, we do have this social inequality that has to be addressed. And the question is, how do you address this huge challenge? And it's a generational challenge. I'll give you 4 key words for us in Puebla: vision, passion, partnership, and principle-centered initiatives. What is the vision? The vision is that it is possible to end poverty. It is possible to end extreme poverty. What is our passion? Our passion is that we can make it well, we can do it well, we can make it happen, and we can enjoy the process as much as the result. Why do we partner? We partner because we're convinced that many of the initiatives have to be carried out by those who are better posed, better positioned to carry out these programs. So our Zero Hunger initiative in Puebla is not driven by the government. It is supported by the government. And what we did is that we supported an NGO, a food bank. And this is the result. Well, let me just take a step back to let you know that this is an image that impressed me very much some years ago, because what you see on the right is the brain of a child that was properly fed, and on the left is a child with malnutrition. As you can see, there's no synapses in the brain of the left, very obscure areas, as opposed to what you see in the right, a brain that is completely illuminated. The thing is that malnutrition at an early age is irreversible. Even if you feed your children when they are 3, 4, or 5 years old, if they were not properly fed when they were 1 year or 2 years old, this damage is irreversible. So if we want to build inclusive cities and sharing cities, we need to start by ending hunger. That's one of the main challenges that we have. So what we did in Puebla was to work with the food bank of Puebla, and what we supported from the government is giving them a bigger capacity in order to receive food, and we multiplied by 8 the capacity to distribute food. And the other thing that we did to accomplish the goal of, in 2 years, having these 100,000 people out of the hungry situation, is that we invited the universities, we invited the entrepreneurs, we invited the churches to every month donate, share 5 tons of food. And in this way, what we accomplished is that the food bank every month receives 20 million tons of food. And this food is distributed with no political criteria. It is data-based analysis, what we used to really point the exact places in the city that really needed the assistance. And as I told you, after 2.5 years, 107,000 people were able to overcome this situation. This is the amount of resources that were invested by the food bank, by the municipality, and by the citizens in general. So I would like to finish with the 4 words that I started. First, the vision. It is possible to end extreme poverty. We are almost half the way in accomplishing our goal of ending hunger in Puebla. We want to be the first city in the world to say that nobody has hunger, is not fed properly in our city. And out of the 250,000, we now have a goal accomplished of 100,000, a little bit more than that. So imagine that it is equivalent to having all the No Camp, the stadium, completely full with people. 100,000 people that now have overcome this situation. So we have the vision, we have the passion, we have partnered with the churches, with the entrepreneurs, with the universities. And the last thing, this initiative is principle-centered. Why? Because we don't give anything for free. The food bank carries out an assessment of how much each family can pay for food. And they pay accordingly to their capacities. And if they don't have any chance of paying for food, they can work for food. So they can go to a food bank, and they can work for 1 day and receive the support of food. And finally, I want to thank the Minister of Infrastructure of the State of Puebla, Javier Albizuri, who is with us, Eduardo Peniche, who is the Minister of Economic Development, Victor Mata, who was the Minister of Economic Development of the city, my spouse, my wife, Susie, who carried out this program with me from the DIF, and all of you that have shared with me these minutes, and thanks for your attention.
Thank you. You know, the quote says it all: who has the vision, you never forget it. Luis, thank you very much. Often we don't appreciate the amount of work goes in fulfilling the basic need of humans, hunger. And the effect these things have, a lifelong effect these things have on our society if we don't address these issues right in the childhood. All the cities around the world has notion of 3Ds. And these 3Ds have been very important and integral part of the cities. Number 1, democracy. Nothing has changed the human life so much in the last century than the notion of democracy in our cities. It gives us access, it gives a voice, it gives people freedom. Digitization, second D, has given us enormous opportunity to overcome all the barriers. In the last 3 to 4 decades, we see what technology and digitization has done. It has brought an equality in our society. It has given us a tool where you can raise your voice, you can actually participate at any level. Dignity, third D, is very important because by and large when people are coming out of poverty, they get dignity in the cities. Cities are the place where all this dignity is happening for the humans. The fourth D is very important, and that is the core of our session, disability. How do we include people with disability, hunger, deafness, people with physical disability? And how do we make sure that cities are not going to have the final objective of fulfilling any of the 3Ds unless we include people with extreme disability? After all, the notion of democracy is giving opportunity to the most vulnerable in our society. That's what the notion of democracy is. It is our honor to have the Lord Councillor from Kampala, Councillor Murshid, with us, who is not only a champion, but he demonstrated to me in a very small incident just here, an hour or so ago, where he was not going to budge. And he said to me, if I can't sit on the same stage where everyone else is going to sit, I'm not going to come on this panel. I heard it very carefully, and I want to acknowledge that we do want to improvise things, make everything accessible. Hopefully by next year when you come here, Murshid, you will have every access addressing this issue where everyone can come despite any disability. But please share with us what are the contributions you are making in your cities, and I'll give you the clicker and the mic is all yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Bwembo Murshid Kasule. I'm from Kampala, Uganda. I think you help me with this.
Okay.
First of all, I would like to thank the conveners of this conference or Congress for having thought about me when I wrote to them that there was a missing gap as far as smart cities are concerned. Thank you very much, the organizers and my team. You've been supportive. As they've told you that I'm a Lord Councillor from Kampala. I represent people with disabilities. And I'm also a computer scientist, and I'm also an applications developer with an NGO called Afro Django Initiative, supported by Python Software Foundation. For me, I'm going to share with you, that is Kampala City, is found in East Africa, near countries like Kenya and Rwanda. People with disabilities in Kampala City. Kampala is a home to about 6,028 people with disabilities. And then we grapple with problems of education and employment. And then when you look at the uneducated and the unemployed, we have 50% of the number I've given you above. Those are people that are uneducated and unemployed. So it means that they are not able to access digital devices and then use digital efficiently. Because you cannot use digital if you are not educated. You may not use it when you are not employed because you will not be able to have access to purchase data and the rest. And then 8% are the people in school. 40% of these people are into the informal sector. They employ themselves in small businesses. And then just 22% of them are in the formal employment. This is based on the notion that in most cases when we are developing apps, we always tend to look at the business perspective. If I develop an application, what will be the turnover? What will be the return on investment? So in most cases, people with disabilities will always be out. And then we look at why digital inclusion. People with disabilities look at the applications not only as a fancy tool. These are direct rehabilitation tools. For example, a person who is deaf, the moment he has WhatsApp or any other means like Messenger and Facebook, he can be able to communicate, and you may not even know that that person has a disability. So it helps us in communication, electronic transactions. Even if a bank is not accessible, when I have my phone, I can be able to do transaction. Social participation, I can talk to each and every friend of mine using Facebook and other. Advocacy, let's say if there was no ramp here, when I have my phone, I can do evidence-based advocacy. I'll just snap my phone and then maybe report to the authority that this place is not accessible. Self-actualization, digital access helps us also to contribute to the society. I can make a complaint, I can make an advancement, and then it also creates employment. There is nothing that creates employment for people with disabilities than digital access. I can do anything. I can be a teacher. I can be a software engineer. I can be anything with digital inclusion. Challenges, I'm talking about these challenges based on the sub-Saharan perspective. High costs, limited access to information. You can find that some information digitally cannot be accessible by the deaf or by the blind. Even the way websites are built, some of them have got very high color content, whereby people with epilepsy and other disabilities cannot be able to use it. And then there is unavailability of tools and softwares. For example, the deaf, the blind would need a talking computer, and then it has to be with JAWS, and then JAWS goes at a cost, and then even certification of such softwares. In sub-Saharan Africa, it is a problem. Unusable softwares and applications. You can find that some of these softwares are not so much tailored to fit the needs of the various people with disabilities. Basing on the other notion of basing on business and the populations where people with disabilities don't make business sense and our population is not all that big. Limited and slow internet access. For example, things like IoT in sub-Saharan Africa. Data is expensive, the bandwidth is low, so even if I wanted to use IoT to switch on lights in my room, it will take me like 3 or 4 minutes before I can use IoT to switch on my lights and the rest, so it means it may not be so good for me. Physical inaccessible digital platforms. You can find, like, let's say, some hubs, or even when I wanted to get here, I had to wait for the ramp. I wanted to use a podium, but I could not use it, so it's a problem. And then digital illiteracy among people with disabilities. When you look at most of the data available through World Bank and the rest, all the research, they say people with disabilities are the poorest of the poor. We are the most unemployed, and then it's either way. Disability leads to poverty, and poverty leads to disability. And then digital literacy, most people with disabilities think that maybe they cannot be able to use those. They left it, they have been frustrated. Most of them leave it at that. So, go ahead. And then how to intervene, developing usable content and applications. For example, if you are developing a phone, how are the digits being able for a person maybe with some motor problems? Accessible and affordable technologies. Make these technologies affordable. Let's say maybe governments can improvise, or you make them affordable in any way. Training and capacity building. I've come to realize that even developers of these applications do not know about disability. For them, they look at the need and they look at the business perspective. They've not always interested themselves in having these technologies customized to the needs of people with disabilities. We need to do sensitization and advocacy, digital inclusion policies. Let's say if an application is supposed to be launched, what's government intervention? If at all, can government do subsidies for these applications? Can they query them and then test them before they qualify them to be part of the mainstream apps to be used? Open data. We need to come up with open data technologies because these ones will be a basis of research. There will also be a basis of mapping how many people with disabilities we have. Because there is a common notion that people with disabilities are 10% of the world's population. So now every country, every city will get its total population and then calculate it on 10%. I am here to challenge that data. It's not giving the rightful, maybe, information. And then internet accessibility. Make internet accessible to everyone and make it further accessible for people with disabilities, maybe in terms of subsidies or any other. And then accessible and usable technologies. Development of digitally accessible and usable content and tools for people with disabilities, visually impaired disabilities, motor disabilities, auditory, cognitive and physical disabilities. Initiatives undertaken, for example, in KCCA, as I went down, we have, together with AfroJango, an organization which I lead, we have embarked onto doing digital literacy, because there is no way people with disabilities can access digital access when they are not really digitally literate. So we need to teach them how to use a computer, how to switch on a phone, and the rest. Open data initiative, like I said, because most of them have said most of these things. You can go ahead. Thank you very, very much. And then I would like to call for partners out here in terms of software developers and everyone that in Kampala I'm embarking on the development of an open data system that will be mapping people with disabilities within Uganda and Kampala. I'm starting with 3 districts, but I still look for more partners. And I thank you very much for listening to me, for God and my country, and the Barcelona team that invited me and paid for my accommodation and air ticket. I'm so grateful.
Thank you very much, Manuel, for inviting me to participate, our president of FIRA Barcelona, Mexico, and for believing in Mexico. Thank you, Manuel.
Thank you. We have a very limited time, and we have received quite a few questions. So there's some interactions here. I just want to acknowledge Councillor Murshid. You have raised some very important questions. We are progressing, including people with disability in a planning process, in governance, but we are a long way from the reality. But there are glimpses, there are some real glimpses where a number of cities are going forward and including people with disability, any kind of disability, in far more active and, I think, engaging way. But your comments are kindly taken, and I think hopefully, we'll see some results in the near future, that inclusiveness is very important. Look, I have some questions here, but before I go and ask and pick up 1 or 2 questions from here, may I ask if any one of you had any pressing question you want to ask in person? Ma'am, please, I have 2 hands there, and if I please request you to go, just briefly introduce yourself as well, from where you come from, and if you can, Carlos, if you can come forward, please, as well. Please.
Thank you very much. My name is Olga Shepelyanskaya. I work on climate resilience in Asian cities, and I am based in New Delhi. Thank you so much for this very insightful session. I think critical points have been raised that are not raised sufficiently enough. I was very inspired by the example of Pueblo, and in that respect, since I'm French of background, I think many people know that France has quite an exemplary position in this respect, because food shops are not allowed to throw food, and once the date is expired, then they have to give it to NGOs. And I think that's an example that really needs to be carried out, because food is there and it's unacceptable that it's not accessible. My question goes to the different abilities we have when we deal with climate change, and in particular in developing cities. In fact, not only the poor people are most affected by climate change, but people with different abilities are most heavily affected, because there is usually absolutely no provision for them. And when we talk about different abilities, we talk about a much larger group than we think, because these are also children, these are elderly, these may be pregnant women, and so basically pretty much everyone in one way or another doesn't have abilities in a certain context. So I would like to learn from your experience in your cities, what kind of provisions the cities or maybe your organization to an extent takes or maybe looks at. I know you're not necessarily specialized on climate change, but what kind of provisions do your cities take to provide the opportunity for differently abled people to handle natural disasters, to handle all the increasingly frequent climate change events? Thank you.
Thank you, Olga. I may give this to you, if it's okay. And then some comment from you, because it's a very relevant question, disasters and what do we do with people with disability. So from your perspective, and then Murshid.
Thank you very much. One of the main aspects of climate change has to do with air pollution. And what we have done in Puebla is that we have been transforming our public transport system for the last 8 years. And actually, Javier Albizuri is here and Victor Mata is here. They are both, he is responsible and he was responsible of the transformation of the public transport system in Puebla. Just today we inaugurated the third line of this new system, articulated system, very much as what we see here in Barcelona, what that happened in Curitiba, in Medellin. And it has been a huge challenge because it's a paradigm shift in terms of how we move around the city. And even when it's a more efficient transport system and it pollutes much less than a traditional manned bus system, the manned bus system used to be much more comfortable for a larger number of people because we had a huge offer of buses that went all around the city. You could take the bus at the corner of your block. And as you know, with an articulated bus system, you have to walk 2 or 3 blocks to get to the main to the main system. So this is one of the things that we have been doing. And of course, pollution has decreased a lot. Tons of gas effect, climate change polluters have been diminished by the new system. But it has been a fight also with the owners of the previous system.
We get to Murshid.
Thank you very much. On the issue of climate change, my country now is running a program called, in my local language, called Tuveku Kavera. Let's get rid of the polythene bags because they are so detrimental to the environment. And even some multinational companies like Coca-Cola are also injecting in money into the local communities to collect bottles, which are in turn are paid for a fee. And then on the issue of disaster preparedness, as regards people with disabilities, I would say it's still a problem because, like I told you, we've developed a city address model whereby and plots whereby different homes are given addresses and then streets. But still what is lacking, there is no data whatsoever that can locate that maybe such and such is a person with disability. In terms of disaster, they will be the very first person to relocate. And then at times, during the times of rain, El Nino, they always run radio advertisements and TV advertisements and then calling out people to clear the trenches and the rest. But still on the disability perspective, you can find that it's a radio advert. And then that means that the deaf will not be able to hear. When it's a TV advert, then at times the blind may not be able to hear. And then a few of them even own radio sets and TV sets. That's what I can say about it.
Thank you, Murshid. Carlos, would you like to ask your question, and then I'll just summarize the questions from here, please.
My name is, thank you so much for your wonderful presentations and for all the lessons that you have given us, sharing with us in such a short period of time. I have 2 questions. My first question is that I get a feeling after I listen to your presentations that we need to go beyond a notion of inclusive and sharing city to something more on the empathy side of this thing, you know? I mean, I see the need here for a lot of empathy, for a lot of observation, and above all, for a lot of perseverance in trying to address the problems that you're trying to define so well. And the second thing, oh, I don't know if it's a question, is that the way you are looking for solutions run very contrary to the way we think when we are trying to come out with smart solutions. For you, big data doesn't matter that much. What matters is small data, which is those tiny little observations that allows you to understand human behavior, which is fundamental in order for us to be able to design proper solutions for these kind of problems. You know, smart solutions are really solutions looking for problems. Here we have very complex problems, very well observed on the basis of small data, demanding very unique solutions. So my question is, we need to change the logic of smart thinking, smart city thinking, in order to address these problems that are very complex and are very much like close to problems such as homelessness and immigration, which are very real and serious problems. And then we need to go beyond inclusive cities to something like empathy kind of cities. I don't know if that's a question, but it's like a suggestion for you to react to it.
Thank you, Carlos. Shid, I might let you comment on this because this is a very important aspect.
What he's saying is right, but I know, for me, in my sense, I think we are running two different models, but trying to target one of this is the same objective. You can find that the people that are leading the trail of smart cities, even when you go outside there and look at the exhibitors, most of them are companies that are business oriented. But when you look at the model we fall as smart city, it's not all that business oriented. So it means that because the other one is business oriented, it will look more onto those applications that appeal the general majority, and then even their ability to consume the smart city technologies, and definitely they will always leave out what is calling the small data we look at, because for it is like it's economically incapacitated. Somebody building data for the other side will not so much look into it. So I think we need to merge the two, either by policy analysts and then policy makers intervention. That's what I can say about it.
Thank you. Eric, you have some comments?
No, very quickly, I'm a hearing person working to create technology for deaf people, and for years I thought I could just do it with empathy. You cannot. You cannot put yourself in another's shoes to try to find any solution. You need to work with the people that are going to use, and not just consult them or just ask some questions. Have all kinds of people, as I said before, on your team to find out solutions. I think the main problem is this: if organizing this Congress would be people with disabilities, people in a wheelchair, of course you will have all kinds of facilities. We able people just don't think about things. We think it's enough being emphatic, but it's not. I mean, you cannot just imagine how is it like to have another necessity. So for me, empathy is not just what we need. We need inclusion from the planning stage, as you said before.
Thank you.
I completely agree with you. I believe that we have to make a paradigm shift to behavioral economics. I do believe that markets do not always clear, that we don't always have perfect information, and that people are not always profit maximizers. So we have to look at things in a different way. Latin American cities are seen as very unsafe and very unsecure, and we are usually thinking that we need more police and more police cars and more repression to have safer cities. Truth is that what we need is more equality. So I can assure you that the day that we end extreme poverty in our cities, we're going to have safer cities. And it's proved that the most dangerous cities in the world are not the poorest cities in the world. It is the most unequal cities. And that's where empathy comes in place. Not only because you want to do something for someone else that is in need, but because you are convinced that what you do for the other one, you do it for yourself and for your family. And I would like to thank my daughter, who is here also.
Thank you. Their best inspiration, so I think that's a very good thing. Now, to make the democratic process, I'm going to choose one question from the online questionnaires, and the question goes to you, Maria, which addresses, Maria, you have many examples of different and difficult situations that deaf people face. What attention you get from public and private authorities in addressing it?
Well, I can only speak about Spain because we are just beginning with my country. You know, we have attention and they have a preoccupation about this, but they address the thing as I said, as the thing that they have to do because it's the right thing to do, and I don't like this. You know, disabled people are clients of the hotels, are people paying taxes, so it's not the right thing to do. They have to do that because they pay the same and they are people using services and paying for the services. So we are trying to change minds just to make them think that deaf people or disabled people in general are clients. And accessibility is a force of human and economic growth, and we have to address this in that way, not just as a social responsibility thing and a nice thing to do. So they do pay attention, but not in the way I would like them to pay attention. I don't know if it's an answer, but...
Thank you. With that note, and looking at the time, I would ask you to please join me in thanking our panel. And I welcome you, if you have any question, to interact with the panel members or communicate with us through the Secretariat if you have any specific question. And most importantly, for staying back in this session here on the first day of the Congress. So thank you very much, all of you, Eric, Luis, and thank you. And Giorgio, if I can have you here and all the members to have a group photograph.